This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we've watched as Donald Trump has specifically targeted law firms in an effort to get them to capitulate. We have seen some early success, but right now we're seeing a number of law firms actually band together and fight back with some new news that we've just found out today. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, so this is really just breaking. Two law firms, two big, very prominent law firms, one Jenner and Block, the other Wilmer Hale, have refused to capitulate to Donald Trump's executive orders, and they have both individually filed lawsuits in the District of Columbia, challenging the executive orders that target them and target their lawyers. Good for them, good for justice, and it only casts even further shame on Paul Weiss, which went the other way and went hat in hand, tail between their legs, I don't know how many different ways to say it, and entered into a shameful settlement with Donald Trump.
And that's what I wanted to dig into. Do you think that there is some degree of regret for law firms like Paul Weiss that did opt to capitulate, seeing that there are now other law firms that are banding together and giving a sense of collective action against this administration?
I suspect there really is, yeah. And you know, it's funny. It shows how quickly in politics these days and in news these days, sentiment changes. Because, you know, it was only a few days ago when people were saying, well, Perkins probably made a mistake because they're the only ones sitting out there alone having sued. And all of the rest of big law is either capitulating, in the case of Paul Weiss, or staying quiet, right? And we talked before about how shameful it was that big law firms did not immediately publicly rally behind Perkins Coie. And so, you know, literally, you know, 72 hours ago or 4 days ago, we were all like, boy, maybe Perkins really made a mistake. But now here comes, you know, Wilmer Hale, one of the largest, most prestigious law firms. They're headquartered in Washington, D.C. and in Boston, but a big office in New York City and elsewhere. And Jenner and Block, one of the biggest law firms in Chicago, also with a large presence in Washington, D.C. and around the country. These law firms, they didn't even blink. I mean, Paul Weiss, you know, wrung its hands and then begged Donald Trump. You know, Wilmer Hale got their executive order, you know, late last night, and by this morning was already in court. Jenner got theirs a little earlier this week and are in court. So it definitely feels like sentiment has changed. Now, you know, never bet against the cowardice of corporate America or big law firms, but at least right now it does look like Paul Weiss is having a lot of explaining to do about why it said it can't afford, you know, to run a law firm and sue Donald Trump, but yet here are these other law firms that are.
Mark, why does this matter? What are the implications on regular people, the fact that the Trump administration is targeting lawyers? Because I'm sure most people watching right now aren't lawyers, and so I don't want this to be a situation where they say, well, this doesn't directly pertain to me. I don't work at a law firm, and so this is, as far as I'm concerned, really this is fine.
Yeah, so look, this matters to everyone. If you care about democracy, this matters. If you care about making sure that people who can't afford lawyers have lawyers, this matters. Because the truth is, whether we like it or not, the large law firms dedicate millions and tens of millions of dollars each every year to representing causes that are otherwise unpopular or are otherwise where the plaintiffs can't afford lawyers. So, you know, part of the Paul Weiss settlement was to spend $40 million in pro bono legal services for causes that align with the administration's ideology. That is not just $40 million of litigation that it will presumably be on the bad side, but it means that there will be that much less litigation available to parties that need to hire lawyers to challenge the Trump administration. And when you look at who is doing the litigating against the Trump administration, sure, there are some great organizations that are doing it. There are some law firms that are able to do it. My law firm is doing some of that litigation, but a lot of that litigation gets carried by big law firms. And if those law firms are either unwilling or afraid to bring cases, that's going to mean that the Trump administration will go unchecked. It means that individuals who have been wronged by the Trump administration won't be able to get lawyers, and that will really cripple democracy.
And so, look, obviously, this is going to have an impact on how people perceive the few law firms who do opt to capitulate. But does reputation really matter within this community? Because like more broadly, you look at what we're seeing in the world, and it does feel like we're in a post-shame, post-hypocrisy, post-truth world. And so in a world, 20 years ago, for example, where people wouldn't do things out of fear of being viewed as a pariah in their field, or being viewed as as a black sheep, and so they wouldn't want to do something that's gonna reflect poorly on them. We are in a different world where folks are more willing to kind of cast aside their integrity in deference to money or proximity to power. And so for folks like Paul Weiss and other law firms that do inevitably capitulate, because I don't think that we've seen the end of it, although I hope that these two law firms opting to fight back so quickly sends a signal to other law firms that is what they should do. But does it matter anymore for these law firms what their colleagues, what their other folks in this industry think of them?
Yeah, it matters in two respects. The first is it matters for recruitment. They've got to constantly be recruiting new lawyers, and particularly law students or young lawyers to come to their firm. And I can't imagine that Paul Weiss right now has a particularly compelling argument to to law students why they should go to Paul Weiss. So I think that number one, it hurts in the talent pool, and there is a big competition for talent in the legal industry.
Yeah.
The second thing, though, is, just ask yourself, if you're a client who has a case against the Trump administration where you've been wronged, the government has denied you a government contract, or it's a criminal case where the government is on the other side and they are trying to pursue you criminally, would you really go to a law firm that wouldn't even stand up for itself? I just put it myself in the shoes of a client for a second. If I had a need for a lawyer to represent me adverse to the Trump administration, am I really going to go to a law firm that is trying to suck up to him, or am I going to pick a law firm like Jenner or Perkins or Wilmer that has shown that they're fearless? They're willing to look Donald Trump in the eye and say no. Or for that matter, Williams and Connolly, which represented Perkins, or Paul Clement now, who's representing Wilmer Hale, or Cooley, that's representing Jenner. These are law firms that have shown themselves willing to look at the administration head on and say, we're not going to back down. We're going to keep fighting. That is something, I do in my law practice. It's something Democracy Docket does in the news and information they put out. And I do think, and Brian, it's something you do. It's something you do in your coverage. And I think you would probably agree that there's like a market for that. There's a market for that in the consumer news space, but there's also a market for that in the consumer of legal services space, because people don't respect people who won't fight for themselves or won't stand up to Donald Trump. So I do think there's a price to pay. Now, there's an argument that Paul Weiss will make on the other side, which is that some of their legal work actually needs approval from the Trump administration. So for those clients, a good amount of ass kissing is, probably helpful. But I think you may be seeing a sorting out of law firms that you go to because you want to fight, and those law firms you go to because you're just trying to find the most entertaining court jester in the court of Donald Trump.
Well, look, I think what you just said underscores the importance of having people who are willing to fight, and you are doing that not just with your firm, but also your team with what you're doing at Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet you founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Highly recommend that for anybody looking to support Mark and his team and their work, please make sure to sign up. Mark, why law firms? Like, we've seen Donald Trump be very deliberate about who he decides to attack. There's some obvious ones. The tech oligarchs, because they determine what the algorithms look like. We've seen the way that that's paid off with somebody like Elon Musk. The media, another obvious one, because we've seen the way in which Donald Trump can try to get them to cow to him and hopefully confer onto him some positive coverage or try to tamp down criticism of him. But why law firms specifically? Why was that his next target in terms of who he was trying to basically put under his thumb?
Yeah, and I think it's because he's being sued over these executive orders and he's losing.
Yeah.
And so I think Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to stem the tide of embarrassing defeats that he and Pam Bondi and the rest of the Misfit band that he has over there, how they stem that. I assume, by the way, Brian, they're on like one big signal chat over there, like, hey, we lost another lawsuit.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, Signal? Yeah, something tells me. Something tells
Did
me
you
that's
get
probably.
added? By the way, Brian, did you ever get added to the Signal chat?
I'm still waiting. I've actually tried to keep my phone line clear just in case that invite finally comes in. But so far,
Big emoji energy, by the
yeah,
way.
big emoji. That's
Big
right.
emoji. But anyway, so they you know, so I think Donald Trump's targeting the law firms because, you know, and he's targeted judges, right? I mean, you see the Republicans going after judges. He's targeting law firms for the same reasons, which is that he
Right.
is trying to prevent the continued defeats that he's suffering in court. So one way you do it is you intimidate judges. Another way you try to do it is by intimidating the lawyers who are suing you. And so, you know, that is probably the simplest answer from point A to point B.
But Mark, of all people who should understand the consequences of capitulating and the consequences of giving Trump an inch for somebody who will then take a mile, it should be these people. Like, these are the people who know him the most intimately in terms of how he abuses the legal system and how he keeps taking and taking and taking. And so, of all people, why would lawyers think that A, this is a good idea, knowing the ways in which he'll become emboldened by it, and B, think that he's going to operate in good faith and not immediately turn around and say, hey, now I want more, now I want more, now I want more. He doesn't negotiate in good faith. He takes as much as he possibly can because everything is, when he thinks about these things being transactional, it's just in his benefit, not in the other parties.
No, that's exactly right. And you asked the big question that if I could ask Brad Karp, the chairman of Paul Weiss, I'd put to him, which is that, you know, why do you think Donald Trump's going to keep his end of the bargain? I mean, by the way, you know, if you take Karp at face value, Donald Trump violated the agreement like moments after they entered into it because
right.
he circulated provisions that Paul Weiss seems to think were not in the agreement. And what was the response? Did Paul Weiss say, oh, no, we didn't agree to these things? No, they stayed silent because Donald Trump owns them.
Correct.
Like, Donald Trump owns them. If Donald Trump tomorrow just announced without even asking Brad Karp, Paul Weiss has now agreed to do $70 million of pro bono, Paul Weiss would do $70 million of pro bono. Like, he has all the leverage. And it's like you said, Brian, what I don't get, it's the same question you asked. I don't get is it's not like Donald Trump doesn't have a track record of this. It's not like this is the first time that Donald Trump has proven himself to be an unreliable bargaining.
Right, it's like Paul Weiss is going to be. Hold on, Donald Trump didn't keep his word. The real estate mogul from New York, that Donald Trump didn't keep his word.
Yeah, it's just astounding, and it is astounding. Astoundingly bad judgment for a law firm that, you know, prizes itself as helping clients in negotiations.
Right.
It's astoundingly bad judgment for a law firm that wants to say they are tough litigators. They look like a bunch of little pussycats right now, not like tough bulldog litigators. But it's also terrible for democracy. So that's the deal there. But as you say, I don't think we have seen the last of it. We have already seen news reports in the New York Times that suggest another New York law firm may have, before even being targeted, may have just preemptively showed up at Donald Trump's doorstep to try to cut a deal. And that's, you know, maybe taking obsequiousness and shamefulness to a whole other new level. We'll see what happens there. But at least for today, we can celebrate the fact that in addition to Perkins Coie, my old law firm, standing up, in addition to small law firms like mine and others putting out statements, that we now have two other law firms, two big law firms that have looked Donald Trump in the eye and said, we're not intimidated by you. We're going to stand up to you. And those are Jenner and Block and WilmerHale. And they both should be celebrated for that. And we then should have our thanks.
Well, I would second that in terms of celebrating every law firm that does decide to take a stand and step up to this abuse that we're seeing at the hands of the Trump administration. And in terms of you and your team, for those who are watching right now, again, to support the work that Mark and his team are doing, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.